So let's just... Fear. Fear is something that we all deal with, okay? I've heard fear explained in the way that, with this phrase, false evidence appearing real. And that is very true. As everything has a reality, everything has, is viewed through the perception of the person that is experiencing the situation. And the situation, and I will also say it's a matter of programming. What we are programmed to see in a situation is what could hinder or enhance the situation. Okay, so fear, one of the main things when I was downloading these messages, when I seen the word fear, we have the word ear inside of this word. And the reason why I feel like the Divine Spirit was showing me this is because it's about what we hear. So we have, like, you hear, you process it through your mind. And after you have processed it, what comes out of your mouth is based on your processing. And it goes back into your ear, and then the cycle starts all over again. So what we listen to, the frequencies, what we say, what we hear other people speak about us and around us is important. I love all types of music. I know that people may have a problem with rock and roll music because of the frequency, heavy metal or rap music, the 808 or, music like that. But I love all types of music. So it depends on the person. I mentioned that to mention this. It depends on the person. It depends on how you alchemize the situation in which you're hearing in those frequencies. But overall, what you listen to is very important. Having affirmations, setting the tone in your atmosphere. If people come into you with some negativity, check that. A couple days ago, we talked about check your circle. So if your circle, the people in your circle are constantly talking negatively about other people, about you, about their life, it may be time to change your circle or either help them. And this is very limited when I say this, help them change their talking patterns. It just depends, it depends on you and the situation and the people, because sometimes people, we have to allow them to flesh out of our circle, and sometimes we may reconnect with those people, or they may just be there for a reason and a season, and that's it. So I'm going to get to the primary scripture, but I wanted to mention that about fear in the ear, what we listen to. This also is speaking to the inner ear, our inner voice. What are we saying about ourselves? How are we perceiving our situations? How are we speaking about our situations? Are we talking negatively about our situations? Or are we finding solutions and putting positivity and affirmations into our situations in our lives? So this scripture comes from 2 Timothy 1:7. So 2, like I've been mentioning, is about duality. The masculine mind and the feminine mind, or the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. That is duality. And with one, we have to bring it together. Those have to be in homeostasis. They have to be in balance. That's what the scales really represent. Being in balance with our subconscious and our conscious mind, with our heart and mind, with our thought patterns and our actions. All of it has to be in harmony. So that's what 2 represents. And the 1, of course, I talked about singularity, bringing it to a balance. And then 7 is the number of completion. So this whole scripture is about completing. And Timothy is from Timotheus. I believe that's the way how you say the name. And it's from, it means honoring God. So we have God in us. We have to honor ourselves and honor the God in us by living our divine purpose, by aligning. And I spoke about aligning your chakras when you pray and what you speak. And eventually you start to transform your life over and over again through the mental processing. So I'm going to read the scripture. I'm going to read it first in English, and then I'm going to go to with breaking it down in the Greek. Okay, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind, or either self-discipline, depending on the translation. So this specific scripture is so powerful. So on the members section on my YouTube page and also on Instagram, I have an entire breakdown diving deep into the Greek meaning and the philosophies that go behind this scripture. I also used this scripture in a Blockbuster, I believe it was, ritual, and I turned it into a I am statement, and it's very powerful. So you can check that on my primary channel as well as on my secondary, my biblical magic and divination channel. That's my second one, if you want to know about the ritual. Okay, so first I'm going to go back over it. All right, so for God, it represents, if you see God in the scripture, represents our higher mind, the Lord, the higher mind, or either God working within us. Has not given us the spirit. So the spirit is like an energy. We don't always walk around in fear. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad. So it's an energy. And that energy can come up, it can be stirred up, predicated on the people, the lifestyle, and the situations that we have surrounding us. So when that happens, we have to know that it's false evidence appearing real. It's a facade. It's a mentality. And with that mentality, it can be cut down. But going back to the situation with Jesus in the desert, like I was saying, it represents the crucibles of our mind. It represents our self-doubt. Any fears that we may have, we have to address them. When we are going through these tests and trials and tribulations, we're going to be faced with fears. And what do we do in those fears? I know that when I've been faced with fears, at times I have fallen victim to those fears. I bought into the facade of fear. I bought into that energy of fear. When we recognize that the spirit is like an energy, and energy can be worked. You can work energy according to your favor. So you can take what is fear and make it as your strength. And that's the whole process. That's the whole purpose of taking ourselves through that alchemized process of changing lead into gold, changing a lower vibration into a higher vibration. If we recognize it, it's a test, it's a trial, it's a tribulation. But guess what? It's like resistance. Like when you go to the gym, you got to work it out. Keep working it out, all right? Okay, so back up. For God has not given us the spirit of fear. Okay, it's not given to us, but we will encounter it. We don't have to live and vibrate in the energy or the frequency of fear, but power, love, and self-discipline or sound mind. So I'm going to go here to some of the Greek here. All right, so it reads a little different. So first we have to recognize the spirit. Spirit is pneuma. Where are my notes at? Here they go. All right. So spirit is pneuma in Greek, and that is where we get the not disease, but the word pneumonia. And pneumonia deals with the lungs. And we have to understand that spirit and breath are like interchangeable. In the Old Testament, it'll be ruach, which is like the breath. That's what gives us life. So if we understand how important breath work and breath is, then we will know how to work with our energy. It is actually a manifesting power. So when you aren't fully breathing, and the process and noticing the process of breathing, which is release, intake, release, intake, it's a cycle. And we have to understand and understand that life is a cycle, and we go through these different cycles in life. So when fear does come up, when it does arise, because it will, we have to know that it is a process of life to help ascend us. Going back to with the spirit and pneuma and like the lungs, this is a technique, breath work, life. Spirit is life. When we give, release, we are able to take in. All right, so the spirit of fear, we know that we could utilize fear to transmute situations. Let me think of a good situation. How I use fear, or how I have used fear, is by approaching it and realizing that it's a lesson to be learned. That's my higher self. Before, how the way I would handle it, I'll be afraid, like shaking with fear, held in fear and bondage, unable to move forward. But when you realize it's just a facade, then you can see ways of how to use it to your benefit, because all things work together for the higher good if you are living according to your purpose. Okay, so divine presence, pneuma, breath, life, divine presence. So we all have breath, we're living, we have the divine presence within us. So divine presence, you can say God, if you will. All right, and it also connects us to the tongue. When we are speaking, I've been talking about this, when we are speaking, it's a whole process. It involves the lungs. It involves us pushing the air out of our lungs, processing a mental thought, using our tongue to produce the sound. All of this works in tandem, but we also are listening to what we are saying. So it's an entire regenerative process. So being mindful of our breath, our life, our spirit, our tongue, and our mental processing, and working it all together. And even furthermore, when we get our emotions involved, that's a whole nother set of willpower and force. So all of these processes, like when you dig into the scriptures and ancient texts, what makes it so beautiful is that everything works together. You can see a bigger picture of all of these things coming together. Okay. And let me move on to the next part. Okay, the spirit, but of limitless potential. So in the English they have here love, and love is agape, and that word for agape. Actually, let me back up. So not of fear, but of power. So power in the Greek is, give me a second with pronouncing it, this is where we get the word dynamic and dynasty from. So dynamic, when we know that we have limitless potential, that's what that word means, limitless potential, that we have dynamic abilities. We can make our lives a dynamic force to build a dynasty. But we have to first recognize that we have limitless potential. That means there's no limit on our infinite potential. But the key word there is also potential. Potential is like a seed. I think of the example of the Garden of Eden. So the pun with the apple has seeds inside that apple. So it's not so much about the apple itself, it's about the seeds. We have a seed planted in our mind. That's our mental programming. But we can uproot that seed and plant a new seed in there, into our minds, into our hearts, into the ground. And guess what? That's limitless potential, because it has the potential to grow and produce more. And from there, it will multiply with more seeds, plant those seeds, and it will continue. This is how we can build new habits. This is how habits are formed. When we were younger, some point in our lives, a seed was planted in our minds and in our hearts. Now, were they good seeds or were they negative seeds? That's up to us to determine. And if they're negative seeds, it's time to uproot them and plant in new seeds deep, deep, deep into that rich, vast soil. So limitless potential and love. I was saying love is not just like, oh, I love you, or like, oh, I love that. It's agape love. Agape love is sacrificial, unconditional love. I did a love series around Valentine's Day. I went over, I think it was like about 8 different types of love. And one of the main loves was agape. And agape is, like I was saying, like unconditional, sacrificial love. And this is a love that is also explained as motherly love. A mother that willing to sacrifice her temple, willing to sacrifice her resource, all that. They're willing to sacrifice for the life that's growing in her. So if we look at limitless potential as a seed, that okay, so let me go, hold on, something's coming through. Okay, so that seed, going back to the Greek word, which I'm having a difficult time pronouncing, 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷, I believe that's the way how you pronounce it. But anyways, this is where we get the word dynamic and dynasty. Okay, like I was saying before. So with that dynasty, that seed, what we plant today, we're building a dynasty. What dynasty are you building? Fast forward 20 years from now, fast forward 45 years from now, what seeds are you planting today to build your dynasty? You have to ask yourself that. Ask yourself that periodically, every day. Because really, we may look over the span of 10, 20 years from now and say, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But what are you doing right in this moment to help water that seed, to help nourish that seed? So you can be on the dynamic path, living your dynamic life and building your dynasty. What are you willing to sacrifice now because of the love of that seed? All right, let me see. And self-discipline in a sound or either sound mind. So I'm going to explain this two different ways. Sound mind. Sound mind, think about someone tuning an instrument and it's out of whack, like it's off pitch, or someone singing off pitch, whichever. I think tuning an instrument is a better example. You're tuning an instrument until you hear that right sound. That's when you know that it's in tune. I'm using this as an analogy. We off path. We're not living our divine purpose. We're over here. We're doing this, doing that, doing everything else besides what we're supposed to be doing right in the moment because we're out of tune. We have to have a sound mind. That means we have to be in pitch. We have to be in alignment. That alignment and sound, it's something with that sound, like frequency. We have to have the frequency of unconditional love. That's what I hear. And that unconditional love, that agape love, will keep us on the right path that is right for us. Because that burning desire will keep you motivated when you are faced with fear. False evidence appearing real. When you're faced with things that may be trying and difficult. When you're faced with difficult relationships, difficult situations. Because you have a sound mind and that burning desire and passion, that you will stay on that path. Now I'm going to explain it with self-discipline. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Self-discipline. Something with that. All right, so discipline. All right, this is one thing that I would hear people say, that spare the rod, spoil the child. And they would use it's a scripture about disciplining your child. So that discipline is speaking to, it's a self-mastery. When you are a child, you look to your parents for guidance. They're supposed to be the rod and the staff in your life. Rod and staff are magical, mystical concepts. The rod is like your mastery, like your magic, your willpower. The staff is what you lean on when you need assistance. So as parents, or even if you're not a parent, you're a parent of your life. Using your self-discipline is your willpower, your magic. I love magic. So magic or energy work or miracle working. You fill in the blank with word you want to use, but it's your willpower. And your staff is what you can lean on when you need a break. This also speaks to staff as far as being able to delegate tasks, being a proficient communicator, to know what to say and how to say it. Going back to the process of speaking, engaging the lungs and the breath, the spirit, our power, life force, our mental process, and our diction. On a more esoteric level, you have the rod as like your magic, and then your staff is you performing a ritual and delegating the task to your angels or to your guides or whatever you assign to that task. For those that are interested in do divination and perform magic and rituals. These are all like esoteric concepts. So furthermore, going back to the example with children, spoil the rod, spoil the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child. So that discipline doesn't speak to like physical discipline, although it can manifest as physical discipline, meaning, giving guidelines. But it speaks to instilling willpower and techniques and boundaries to obtain the best optimal possible outcome in life. Back to living a dynamic life, back to building a dynasty. And that's what it is related to. Now, let me see if there is another word here. Love, self-mastery. Okay. Having a perfected verbal. Okay. In the Greek here, it's, I don't remember how to say this word. Okay. But anyways, it's translated as having a perfected verbal discipline. That's deep. A perfected verbal discipline. Mastery of your words. And when I read through text, that's why I like to look at the words, because the words are like symbols and they speak differently than just hearing someone talk. So this speaks to it speaks to language, mastering the language, and even etymology. And watching what you say and even what you think, but also what you read, what you listen to. But with your verbal, back to the concept and the whole process of speaking that engages all of these aspects. We just speak and we just speak, most of the time just free-nilly, just shooting, what they call shooting the breeze, just speaking, just talking, just to be talking. But every word is inspired by a higher entity. You ever seen the example of the devil and the angel, quote unquote, on one shoulder or another? When we speak negatively, we're manifesting negative situations through our tongue. When we speak positively, we're manifesting positive energies and situations in our lives. So when I read having a perfected verbal discipline, steady working on our vocabulary, but more so how we speak and with what authority we speak. You can say something jokingly, but the intent can still be so powerful that it manifests. So this study, it speaks on so many different levels. False evidence appearing real. What we hear, because what we hear is the process of creation. The voice, perfected verbal discipline. When God created the world, God could have just created with the hands, could have just thought of something and then just created it. But it said that God spoke. So when you see God in a scripture, that means it's an example for us to take. Before God physically did anything, just didn't even have to lift a finger. We really don't have to necessarily lift a finger. It all happens first in the great imagination. And then we see it, we speak it. We speak it into existence. Affirmations, watching what we say out of our mouths. Okay, that's very important, because we can produce more fear in our lives that will become a stumbling block for our manifestations and for our lives.